Welcome to the Peak Potential Pursuit podcast, where we dive deep into the stories of individuals who exemplify grit, grace, growth, and gratitude, or as we like to call it, the G4 journey. Prepare to be inspired as we unravel the journeys to unlocking our peak potential.
All right. Well, it's been a while since we've done a podcast, so this is episode number 5. We've kind of had a hiatus the last few months while we've been busy hunting and family stuff and now holidays, so it's good to be back doing another one. So we wanted to just kind of recap our 2024 hunting season and tell a few stories from that and just kind of talk about the journey and how it helped us reach our peak potential this year. So just kick it off and talk about the tags we had, and then we can get into some stories. So for me personally, the only tag I had this year was a dedicated deer hunting tag. So for anybody that doesn't know what a dedicated hunting tag is in Utah, Utah does this program where it's a 3-year program. You provide a certain amount of service hours over 3 years, and with that you get to hunt all 3 seasons of the deer season. So archery, muzzleloader, and rifle. And within those 3 years you can kill 2 deer. 2 deer in 3 years. So that's the only tag I had this year. My cousin had an archery elk tag here in Cache Valley, so I was helping him scout for that a little bit too, and hunted with him a few times, but I mostly was focused on deer for myself. So tags did you have?
Yeah. So I didn't have any deer tags this year, and I realized kind of how much I missed it. So I had a pretty sweet archery elk tag in Idaho this year. That was a lot of fun, and then I ended up getting a spike elk tag for here in Utah. So a lot of fun to be had. So what do we want to talk about first? We've kind of talked about some of our favorite gear. Not to get too crazy into it, but if you could pick one thing that either new gear or something this year that you felt like helped you maybe go a little farther or be a little more effective in the woods, what would you say your favorite piece of gear was?
Yeah, I think for me, and we should probably mention we're not sponsored by any of these.
Yeah, we're not sponsored. This is just all personal preference.
My favorite piece of gear this year was my new XO K4 backpack. That thing is just legit.
Yeah,
I got to put it to the test a little bit. I didn't end up harvesting a deer this year, so
spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert, yeah, that's the word I was looking for. But my dad did, and I got to help my dad pack it out. So I threw half the deer on my pack, and he threw half the deer on his pack, and we didn't have to haul it too far because we had horses. But where he shot it was down in the steep basin that you couldn't get horses down into, so we had to pack it up out of the basin and then got the horses to it. But so I have that pack, and my dad is still running a Kuiu pack, which I ran for like 7 to 10 years or something. And just how easy it was to pack the K4 compared to the Kuiu, and then just it's so balanced on your back, it's so comfortable, like it was just incredible. And then I love the organization of it too. I mean, that was the only animal I got to pack out, but even aside from that, just my spotting scope and the tripod and all my snacks and water and clothes and whatever, like it just all fit perfect. So it was awesome.
K4, so I have the K3, and I've seen the K4. My uncle runs the K4, and yeah, they made a ton of improvements to the K4, and it's awesome. It's one of those you get the K3 and then the K4 comes out and you're like, gosh dang it. But still love the K3, and I'll continue to rock it. So mine, I actually brought it because I feel like it'd be a little bit harder to explain. It's called the Grail. It's a water filtration bottle. So what you do is you just basically detach this thing you scoop this up in water, or I did out of an elk wallow this year because I wanted to put it to the true test. So you just find the cleanest water source you can. So in the elk wallow, you kind of have where the water's still coming up and kind of has a little stream coming out. So I found that and I just shoved that sucker in the mud and just tilted it over just enough that the water came in. And this is the filter right here. So once you put the water in there, you just vent the top, and you put this in and you just compress it down and it filters the water into this container here, pushes it up through, filters into here, and it was awesome.
And those come in different sizes, right?
Yeah, different sizes, different colors. I think they have like a titanium one as well.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the 24 ounce. But yeah, so I filtered a ton of water with this, then just poured it into my Camelback that I had or whatever. One thing I liked about this too is you can throw your electrolytes or powders in here and still use it after you filter it without affecting your water filter.
Mm-hmm.
So that was awesome, but this came in handy when me and my uncle were, we went back for a couple days. We were back probably like 6 miles away from the truck, and yeah, that saved us. So just nice to know having a water filtration system can make you stay a little longer and have it, and just the ease of that, it was awesome. So that was my probably favorite one that I looked at and was like, man, that was simple and efficient.
So speaking of like favorite things in the mountains, that's favorite piece of gear. What was some of your favorite meals that you had this year? Because we all know that hunting in the backcountry, food can be difficult. So
yeah, I think personal preference on the peak or mountain house meals, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those are always good, but sometimes those get old after a while. I mean, they're lightweight, they have stuff, they get you the calories you need. I think some of the ones, I'm trying to remember what they were called, but got them at Costco, and it's like a fruit bar, like that's it maybe is what it's called. Almost like a fruit granola bar. They were lightweight and really good, and I just felt like kind of gave you that energy. I really like those. I'm also a sucker for honey buns. I love honey buns. But if you're going way back in there, those fruit ones, or anything fruit, dried fruit, really, I feel like gives you the energy, and is good tasting. So, what about you?
yeah, I think some staples for me that I always have in my backpack, as far as snacks, I love craisins.
Mm-hmm.
So again, another fruit.
I think you put me onto that a couple years ago.
Yeah, they're just like a quick burst of energy, and they got some sugar in them, so it gives you the sweetness. My splurge snack is Snickers. I love packing around some Snickers. But actually, the last couple of years, I don't know, maybe just because I'm getting older or something, but I've really taken a liking more to like natural stuff. Like I always crave apples in the backcountry, especially during the archery season when it's hot for some reason. So I always pack apples.
And like fresh apples or dried apples?
Yeah, no, fresh apples.
Okay.
I love the fresh, like juicy apple. And then in terms of meals, I've eaten so many dang mountain houses and peak meals and everything that I've just started getting sick of them a little bit. So we have the luxury of having horses, which when you have horses, you can pack a lot more because you're not carrying the weight on your back the whole time. So for me, as often as possible, I take tinfoil dinners because you can put it in the cooler on the horse to keep it cold. You know, it can be on ice for 2, 3, 4 days depending on the temperatures. And just heating that up on a fire at night, having like leftovers or whatever, you know, steak, potatoes, like it's so much better than
just a real hot meal. Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, those are some of my favorite foods. Oh, the other thing I love carrying around in my backpack are some of the Mountain Ops products.
Yeah, absolutely.
During hunting season specifically, my favorite one this year has been their Hydrate product. You know, when I drink that, I never get cramps.
Yeah.
Just truly helps you stay hydrated, replenishes all of your electrolytes and everything. So
I dabbled in their Enduro this year. That's
yeah, I love their
for those that don't know, they have an Ignite which has caffeine and a lot of other different things in it to give you energy. The Enduro is basically the same version minus the caffeine. So and I had some of those and tasted really good.
Yeah,
and
it's a good break
yeah,
from
it was
water.
a good, yes, it was definitely a good break from water. So Brody, with you having the tag you did, being able to hunt the different seasons with the different weapon systems, I guess let's talk about that. I know you had a specific buck you were after this year and chased him. So just kind of talk us through, I mean, archery was first, maybe you could talk us through that and how that went.
Yeah, so I'll kind of start backing up a little bit. I've had this goal for myself that I want to kill a buck that's over 180 inches. And I've had that goal for the last like 10 years. And I was determined more than ever this year that I was going to accomplish it, because going into this year, in the last 10 years, I've had 6 bucks that I've hunted that have been over 180 that I haven't harvested myself. And I know they've gone that big because other people have killed them. You know, one being as big as 195, one went 193, a couple that were just over 180. And so I was more determined than ever to go kill a 180 buck this year. So starting the year off, there's a lot of preparation that goes into the hunting season that people don't see behind the scenes, especially when you have horses, because you've got to get your horses in shape, and you know, so you're riding every weekend and you're scouting. And I didn't run any trail cams this year, but lots of years we do. With Utah, you can only run them until July 31st now.
Yeah.
So there's that. I mean, there's trying to stay in shape. You know, we posted on our Instagram page kind of the grit we were going through in the off season, running trails and going to the gym and doing different things to try to get in shape. So fast forward to hunting season, and archery starts in August in Utah. It's usually about mid-August, around the 18th, 19th, somewhere in there. And I couldn't go opening weekend, if I remember right. I went like the Tuesday after opening weekend, and I had Tuesday through the rest of that week off of work. And my dad couldn't get work off that week. You were busy scouting for your elk hunt. My cousin was busy with his elk hunt, and so I went solo. I just packed up my horses and went in solo. And I went up to a place we've been going for a lot of years. And opening weekend, I'll be honest, it wasn't the weekend, opening week, it sucked. I was up there by myself, driving up the trail to the trailhead. I got a flat tire on the horse trailer.
I forgot about all this. Yeah.
So that was a great start to the hunt. I just left it. Like, I loaded up my horses and I was like, forget it.
Figure it out when you get back.
I'll figure it out when I get back. So that was the start to the hunt. I go up there solo, and I had planned to stay up there for I think 3 or 4 days. I had enough food and everything for a 3 or 4 day hunt. And opening day comes, and I couldn't find hardly any bucks. Well, I saw some small bucks, a few does, saw some elk. I think I looked in like 2 or 3 different basins the night before, plus that morning. Just wasn't finding anything, so I was a little bit discouraged. There was a rainstorm coming, and I was just frustrated because of the whole tire thing and everything.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was only up there for about a day and a half, and then I came out and was like, I'm gonna just relocate, whatever. So come out, get the trailer, the tire, the horse trailer changed out. Oh, and I forgot to mention, also driving up, my truck overheated. So I had the truck overheat, a flat tire, couldn't find big bucks, so I was frustrated. So I went back home, regrouped for a half a day, went back to a different location the next morning, still solo, and that was even worse. Couldn't find deer. Not a single buck that day, in fact. So fast forward a couple more weeks, and my dad and I are up. We had planned to go hunt for like 5 or 6 days, so we went up a few days before that to set up our tent and everything and just haul up some of our gear. While we're up there setting up the tent and everything, I get a text message from my cousin that's like 3 miles away as the crow flies, scouting for his elk, and I get a text, big buck in this basin, 180, you should go find him. And that night, that evening, I had some church obligations that I was committed to. So because I knew that I had those church obligations, I ended up deciding to leave my bow in the truck. I was like, I'll just run up there, set up our gear, set up our tent, whatever, and then hustle back down so I can get to my church obligation. And then I get that text from my cousin, and I was just like, you've got to be kidding me. Of course I would leave my bow. He's got the exact trees pinned where these bucks went into and never came out. And I could have been over there in probably 30 minutes, but I didn't have my bow. So anyway, that finally got me a little excited because he's like, big buck. So I go back a couple days later, and when my dad and I are up there, and I find this buck. And to be honest, at the time, I didn't think he was 180. I thought he was probably like mid 170s, but he was big enough that I wanted to chase him. So without dragging this story on for too long, I hunted him for those 6 days that we were up there, and I think I stalked him 3 different times in those 6 days, and I got as close as like 51 yards to the buck. So what happened with that is we watched this buck in the basin, and he was with anywhere from like 2 to 5 other bucks, 6 other bucks. And so trying to find a stalkable location without all the eyes on you and everything. So we kind of figured out their patterns, where they went, where they like to walk through to bed, their feeding areas and everything. So this particular day that I got to 51 yards, I went down in the bottom of the basin like first thing in the morning while the winds were still flowing down. Because what they'd do is they'd feed up on this steep side hill, and then they'd come down into the basin, walk through the bottom of it, and go into this thick pine draw. So I kind of decided to ambush them. And in the middle, like the bottom of the basin, they would stop and bed for an hour or 2 before they went into the thick pines for the day. So I go down there, and I'm kind of, walking through, trying to decide what to do. And I get to this one little opening that was like a natural pinch point. I was like, I guarantee the deer are walking through right here. So I kind of stop and hang out for a minute, and my dad was still up at the top of the basin glassing. And in Utah, you can use radios. And so he radioed me, just kind of keeping me updated on what the deer were doing. And he had watched a buck bed, and the buck that bedded was facing away from him. And he's probably, 700 to 1,000 yards away watching these deer. So the buck that bedded away from him is what he thought was the big buck. And I should describe this big buck a little bit. Mainframe 4-point, not super wide. He was only like 24, 25 wide. But he was really tall, really heavy, super deep forks. And then on his one left side, he had an inline that was probably 5-6 inches long. And then off of his right back fork, so his G2, he had a cheater. So just a cool buck. So I'm down in the basin in this natural pinch point. My dad's telling me the buck's bedded, and I'm sitting there having this inner debate with myself, like, I guarantee the bucks are gonna come through here. I kid you not, 10 seconds later, here comes 3 bucks walking right at me. And I had no idea they were coming. I didn't hear them or anything. And they had no idea I was there. The wind was perfect. So there's 3 bucks coming at me. There's one in the middle that I'm like, whoa, that buck looks big. And then they saw me because I wasn't like hiding or anything. I was just kind of out in the open, sitting there debating, like whatever. So of course they see me. They didn't smell me, but they went trotting off. So I'm sitting there looking through my binos, and I'm like, that's the big buck. there's no way that's not the big buck. So I get back on the radio, and granted, this was 51 yards. Okay, so had I been ready, like
you could have had a
standing in front of a tree in the shadows or whatever, like there's no way those deer would have ever smelled me. So I would have had a chance. But I wasn't ready, and they were spooked. So my dad's like, no, the big buck's still bedded. He's just, describing to me where he is. I'm like, okay. So I'm still excited, thinking the big buck's still up there, and I start creeping in there, and I think I got to like 80 yards, and then the wind shifted. It was like, I don't know, probably 10 o'clock in the morning now, so the wind shifted and started going back up the basin as it was heating up. So he winded me, of course, and when he winded me and got up, my dad got on the radio and he's like, I hate to ruin your day, but that wasn't the big buck. And I was like, oh, no, you gotta be kidding me. So whatever, that's hunting, right?
Yeah.
It's super exciting, and that's why I love archery season. That's been kind of my kryptonite the last few years, is I've never killed a deer with my bow, and so put a ton of time and effort into it because I want to kill a deer with my bow. I've killed elk with my bow, and there's no feeling like killing an animal with your bow.
It's a rush.
It's a rush like nothing else.
Totally different thing. It's hard to describe.
Yeah. So anyway, blew that chance. I won't drag this on for too long, but I had 2 other opportunities to stalk him on that hunt, and one of them I got to like 65 yards. He was bedded in some trees. I needed him to walk out of the trees to the south, and I would have had a shot anywhere from 65 yards down. And he and the 2 other bucks he was with, I needed him to come out north of the trees, and they went south. And so this was in the evening, it got dark, couldn't see where they went. And then I stalked him another time. Let's see, I stalked him 2 other times in the archery hunt, and I think one time I got to like 95 yards and he saw me. The other time I got to like 85, 90 again, and he winded me. So I'm just making like mistake after mistake. And that's part of the grind of hunting is, every opportunity is a learning opportunity.
Yeah.
I learned a ton on this hunt. So anyway, archery season comes and goes. I had a blast doing all these stalks on him. Fast forward to the muzzleloader season, which muzzleloader season in Utah starts like end of September.
Yeah.
And it opens, the muzzleloader hunt in Utah opens on a Wednesday. And so we packed in on Tuesday on our horses, and we were planning on staying Wednesday through Saturday to hunt. And so this is kind of a crazy story too. So this buck had kept the same pattern all summer. We found him in generally the same spot. He was in different places in the basin, but more or less he was in the same spots. And I think of all the times I went and sat morning and evening to watch for this buck, there was like 1 or 2 days that I didn't see him. So he was super consistent. So opening day of the muzzleloader hunt comes, and we find the buck first thing opening morning, and I'm just kind of watching him, waiting to see what he does, hoping he goes down into this bedding area, and I can go stalk him with my muzzleloader, because with the muzzleloader, you can get, it's the middle ground between rifle hunting and bow hunting.
Mm-hmm.
You can shoot from a little farther away than a bow. You can get 100, 150, 200 yards, whatever, as far as you're comfortable shooting. So I'm super excited. I'm like, I'm finally gonna kill this buck. And the more we had watched this buck too, his body size was just huge compared to all the other deer he was with. So the more I watched him and filmed him, I just kept thinking inside my head, I'm like, this buck has gotta be pushing 180.
Yeah.
Because his body's so big. So I'm watching him on opening morning of muzzleloader hunt, and all of a sudden he gets to the bottom of the basin and he just stands there. And I'm like, what in the heck? Like, he was just standing there staring. And I'm like, what the heck is this deer doing? Because he didn't ever do that. He'd get to the basin, the bottom of the basin, and he'd either bed or he'd go into the thick pines. But he just stopped and stood there for like 5 minutes and then took off running. I'm like, what in the heck? And we heard like this weird, like loud crash in the bottom of the basin. We're like, what in the heck was that? And then we heard this weird like scream. And my dad's like, that was a freaking mountain lion. And I'm like, yeah, it was definitely something. So we sit there and we're glassing, and maybe 10 minutes, 20 minutes later, something like that, I'm looking down into this kind of pinch point that I talked about before, where the deer are always walking through. And I saw what I thought was a deer laying down, and because it was kind of like that time of year, they're not completely fully gray yet.
Yeah.
They're kind of in their transition between like gray and that reddish color, so it almost looks brownish. And I'm like, oh look, there's a deer. And then it started rolling on the ground, and I'm like, what the heck? I've never seen a deer roll. Like,
Yeah.
it looked like a horse when they roll, they like scratch their back. That's what it looked like. So I just keep glassing, and then a couple seconds later, a mountain lion comes walking through. So there was one laying there rolling around. Another one came walking through, so there's two mountain lions down in this basin. I'm like, gosh dang it. So then you're a little freaked out because like with a muzzleloader, you have one shot.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, I'm not going down there with one shot in my barrel. So then this buck, after that happened, this buck disappeared for like 3 days. I went there like morning and night for 3 days straight and could not find this buck. So he disappeared into some safe zone. Well, finally the last day of the muzzleloader hunt comes and we find the buck again. So he came back to his home ground, same pattern, similar spot to where he had been, just up a little bit higher. And I'm like, all right, it's now or never. So I put a stock on him with my muzzy, and this was kind of crazy too. So he was by himself, no other bucks around, and so I'm like, this is perfect, this is my chance. So I go stalking, and I'm on the top of the ridge this time instead of down in the basin, just because of where he was and the wind and everything. And I had an idea of where I thought he was gonna go, which is kind of right below this ribbon of cliffs. And I had put a stock on a couple different times during the archery season to learn that there's this break in the cliffs that if I'm sitting at the top of those, if he walks right through there, like he did in the archery hunt, I'd have like a 75 to 100 yard shot, 150 max. So I do that, I get to that spot, and my dad gets on the radio again, and he's like, hey, the buck just turned around, he's headed the other direction. So I hustle back up to the top of the ridge, I come to these cliffs, and I'm like, oh, I think I can see him from here. So I'm sitting in these cliffs, I see the buck, he's kind of walking away from me, and I literally am like skirting down these cliffs to see where I can get to an open shot. So here I am in the middle of the cliffs, kind of a sitting duck a little bit, because it was like now or never. I wouldn't have had time to scale back up the cliffs. So I'm sitting in the cliffs, I get this open window of where this buck is. He's kind of quartered away from me. I range him, and he was like 212 yards. And in Utah with the muzzleloader this season, you had to have either open sights or a 1-power scope, and I had open sights on mine. So I felt fairly comfortable shooting that far. So I lay down, I'm kind of leaning, my left arm was rested on this dead log, laying down, and my heart was just pounding. Because I was like, your heart's always pounding when you're after a buck, especially, you know, the archery season, same thing, but I didn't really have time to calm my mind. And so my heart was pounding, my mind was racing, and I take this shot and I missed. I was just sick. And I watched the buck run down through the bottom of the basin and into this thick pine draw where he had been going all summer. So I'm just sick about it. I'm like, there was my chance. I missed. So we had to go back home that day. So I went down through the basin, followed his tracks just to double check that I didn't hit him. Sure enough, no blood, no hair, nothing. He was hauling his butt out of there. So we head back to camp, and I had reloaded another bullet into my muzzleloader just in case I saw him. So we get back to camp, and I'm like, I want to go find a rock that's 212 yards away and shoot at it and see what happens. So we go back, I find a rock, it was like 220 or something, so close. Same, like similar angle shooting downhill. I held on the rock the same way I held on the deer, and I ended up shooting about a foot over the rock. So I was like, well, that's what happened. I shot right over that buck's back. So I'm just like kicking myself, but having this dedicated hunter tag,
It's not over. Yeah.
It's not over. I got the rifle hunt. So fast forward to rifle season. I'll keep this part short. Opening day, we go up, and we weren't camping this time. My wife's getting tired of me being gone this time of the year. I've been gone a lot of nights for the archery season, the muzzleloader season. So we just head up super early in the morning and couldn't find him opening day. So I was super bummed. We had to go back home. So that weekend on Sunday and Monday, I was sitting there contemplating like, okay, where could this buck have gone? Where should I go look for him? And my cousin was planning on heading back up there with his wife on Tuesday, and they were going to stay for a few days and see if they could find the buck and see if they could get a chance at it. And then I was planning on going back up either Friday or Saturday. Well, I get a text from my cousin on Tuesday morning as he's heading up the trail on his horses with a picture. There's two guys coming down the trail with this buck in their backpacks. I was just heartbroken, and my cousin's like, this buck is easily over 180. So my cousin had killed a buck a few years back that went like 185, and he said this buck looked bigger than my 185 buck, so I wouldn't be surprised if he's pushing 190. I don't know what he ended up scoring for sure. Those guys didn't have a tape on him and said they didn't score him. But so there we go. Buck number 7 that I found in the last 10 years that was 180 or bigger that I screwed up on. And I screwed up, I mean, it's truly my own fault.
Yeah.
I had 4 chances in archery, messed it up. I had my chance in the muzzleloader, messed it up. And then guys came in with a rifle that had never hunted in there before and shot him from 600 yards away. And where they killed him, this was the other frustrating part, was from the main basin where he usually hung out, he was just on the back side of it in some quakies. And I had gone over into the back side of it that opening day of the rifle hunt, thinking maybe he was in there, but couldn't find him. So, heartbreaker, but you know, it's so fun at the same time. It's what keeps us going back, like just the grind and the grit that it takes to get through it day after day after day. The growth that I had this year, you know, speaking of our G4 journey, and I learned a ton about stalking this year, having all those opportunities, when to be aggressive, when not to be aggressive, the wind, the angles you're coming in from, like so many different things that hopefully in 2025 will be a catalyst to my success. But it was fun. Like, I had a blast. I'm still heartbroken over it every time I come across that picture in my photo reels. It just leaves that.
I remember you sent it to me, and it's definitely hard to see it, and at the same time you get to see it up close, like what he really was, you know. And it was a sweet buck.
Yeah, he's a cool buck. So the hunt goes on, but so many ups and downs along the way. You know, archery season, the days are long and hot. I mean, it's light at like 5 in the morning, so you know, you're getting up at 4, sometimes earlier to get to your glassing spot before light, and then it doesn't get dark till like 9:30, 10 o'clock, so you don't get back to camp till 10:30, 11.
Yeah, you only get a couple hours, and it's a grind.
So anyway, that was my hunting season. The parts I left out along the way, my dad killed a small 4-point during the muzzleloader hunt. That was fun. He was super stoked with the buck. The buck was a cool buck.
He's cool.
He had good backs, fairly tall, really weak fronts though, but I mean, he was just a good little 4-point, and my dad had a blast, and we had fun packing him out. Got to test my K4 like I talked about, so it was good.
And your cousin shot a sweet bull with
this
fellow.
Yeah, he did. I think the bull ended up going 345, so.
Yeah, really just beautiful 6 points.
Yeah.
Long.
Yep.
Perfect, typical, the dream bull for anybody.
Yeah, and that's a whole nother story in and of itself.
Yeah.
Just the grind he had. We might have to get him on
Yeah,
one day to tell us
Brain,
the
we'll get you
story.
on here.
So anyway, tell us about your elk hunt and the process of learning a new area and all that.
Yeah, so me and my uncle got these tags in Idaho area. We've never been, but a good area. A lot of people get it, especially those that get out of state tags. So we went up a couple times scouting, and I think one of the hard things we learned, we both have boys who are playing competitive sports, and you're coaching them, and so having a unit that's like a 3-hour drive just to get there, 3-hour drive back, I mean, it's just hard to plan all that out. But it was awesome. We went up, we actually took our boys the first time we went scouting. Took the side-by-side up and camped overnight, and that first night we were there, we found this was early on, this is probably in late June, maybe early July, and we found a bachelor herd of bulls. There was like 13 bulls. Like we just get to this spot, we start scouting, like bam. We just found them in this clearing at the top of this mountain, and a lot of raghorns. I mean, they're still growing. There was one that was decent, but for me, same thing with, you know, a bow. You just have, I've killed, you know, cow with my bow, but I've never had a big bull tag. This is the first big bull tag I've ever had. So getting that and being able to try and go after that, I was just, you know, wanting to get something decent if I had it. And with archery, you know, they always say don't pass up a bull or a buck on the first day that you'd kill on the last day. And so after going up, that was super promising, seeing all those. So we went up a couple different times, driving around, scouting, glassing, and then before you know it, the hunt's here. After chasing the boys all summer, playing baseball. So it opened the weekend of Memorial. It actually opened on a Friday, so went up on a Thursday.
Memorial Day or Labor?
Or sorry, Labor Day. I say Memorial. Yeah. Labor Day weekend. So started the Friday before that and went up on a Thursday. Got everything set up. Came up and we decided we were gonna hike back into this area. It's probably 5-6 mile hike to get back in there. So we were packing stuff to stay back in there for a while, and we get back in there. And this year is weird. It's really hot, really hot this year. So we got back in there and we didn't hear any bugles, weren't hearing anything, which isn't uncommon. It's early. It was early in the season, so get in there and saw a small herd with a little rag 5, and so we decided that night just to watch them, see what they do the next morning. The next morning we watched them. They came out a little bit, then we saw a couple other hunters that were on the other side and were dropping in the bottom, and kicked them out of there. So we stayed there and we're watching. Didn't have much any other movement in there. We had some cameras in there. We went and checked on some watering hole swallows. Nothing coming in consistent. So we thought it was early, so we went out and on that Saturday and the Sunday we went into a different area that we had some other cameras, and where we had some previous experience from guys that said they'd seen some up in there. So went up in there and just sitting there in the morning watching. We still haven't heard a bugle at this point. It's been a few days. Really hot, and I get a text on my phone because we were up high, and get a text that my grandpa had passed, and never news you want to get on the mountain, anything negative from back home. So that was hard. I mean, he was struggling a little bit, but he was doing a little bit better, and so one of those kind of expected, but not, I guess, at the time. And with that, I decided to get off the mountain, pack up, and head home. And I was able to call and talk to, it was my dad's dad, so I was able to call and talk to the family, because we were up high where we had service, which was good. Got to talk to my grandma, and told them I was going to come home, because we were planning to stay up there that whole week. So went and packed stuff up, went home, and then that following weekend is when we had his funeral. So had his funeral and kind of regrouped, replanned with work, having the days off, right? Just trying to figure out the struggle of that, of when you could get it, see if it still worked out with all the schedules. So me and my uncle went up the following weekend. I went up on a Thursday and got stuff set up, hunted that night, and my uncle was coming up later that evening. I wasn't gonna make it till after dark, so after I found a small 6 point in a totally different area, that I went up, and he was alone by himself, so I'm like, okay, he's traveling and maybe I need him to play. And I was bugling, he was down in this small canyon, and he was heading towards me north. I was on this north ridge. Wind was good because it was coming up the canyon, and so I was letting out some bugles, and he was coming down into the bottom. I'm like, sweet, he's just gonna come up, and it's gonna be this picture perfect thing. And I was doing some bugles, doing some cow calls, trying to get him to come and play, and he didn't have two cares in the world, didn't care at all. Went in the bottom and kind of messed around the bottom, and then ended up walking the opposite way, kind of where he came, and I was just like, shoot. So planned to go there the next morning, so we went there the next morning with my uncle. We kind of sat up in two different spots, and it had just rained that night, so I'm like, it's gonna be great. And we get up there, listened for a while. We're up there, it was dark, and didn't hear anything. Sun starts coming up, starts getting light. So I'd have a few bugles, some cow calls, nothing. It was just quiet. Didn't see anything. And so we go back to get on the four-wheeler by the trail, and right out of the canyon, we saw these tracks, single tracks, larger tracks, almost like right by the dang four-wheeler. And I'm just sitting there, and I look at my uncle, I'm like, this had to have been him. Like, we left him when it was dark in this thick, he went back into these thick pines. I'm like, he had to have just went to bed there and then came out. So, I don't know. Just for motivation, I could say it was him. But, so we went back out of there. We kind of glassed as we were going out, didn't see much. And so we, that night, went and hiked through a different area. It was really thick. My uncle came out sweating like a monkey, and I was like, what happened to you? And he basically said he went through CrossFit workouts, getting through all the deadfall. Coming down, he jumped a bull in there, but couldn't see, it was just so thick, and he kind of side-hilled it, and I stayed up on top. That's what we agreed to, so I don't want any hate about that I took the easy route. I mean, it was thick for me too, but definitely not what he had to go through. I did run into some cows we were dropping off in the Quakies, but couldn't get anything. I guess he kicked up this little, I think it was like a RAG4, and just like some respect for those animals and the ability they could move through that stuff. It's incredible. It's insane.
How
I mean,
quiet
stuff.
they do it.
Yes, quiet, and I mean, you have massive trees that are down that they just like step over or bound over, and with their antlers, I don't know how they do it. It's amazing. But so get down, long walk back, and we kind of debated like, what the heck do we do? We're not seeing anything in a bunch of the areas we've been, and so we decided the next morning we were gonna pop back over to a little bit farther south from where we packed in the 5 miles, go up on the top of this where we'd glassed and seen some of the bulls earlier in the summer. And so we're going, wake up that morning, and we get heading up on the 4-wheelers. It's like probably like 12 miles away from camp that we had to go on the 4-wheelers. So we got up early. It was cold, so bundled up, and we get going. And we're going down just this nice, wide trail, and we're kind of offset a little bit, so I'm not eating dust, and some unfortunate events. The 4-wheeler got pulled, long story short, going like 25-30 miles an hour, and I get pulled in the ravine, crash on the 4-wheeler, get thrown from it. 4-wheeler falls all over me, rolls over me, and something that we'll leave it on a nail biter there for a different episode. But luckily wasn't seriously hurt. Probably should have been either seriously hurt or maybe even killed. And while Brody's holding up, I jacked up my bow. So I just had my backpack on the front, right, strapped down with my bow on top of it. This is my stabilizer from my bow, so I kind of brought it. It's kind of a memory of a hard, good lesson.
So for those that are just listening, this stabilizer is like an 8-inch stabilizer, and this thing is bent at like a 45-degree angle right in the middle.
Yep, right in the middle, and it's got a bolt that comes out the end and screws into the bow. So it got jacked up. 4-wheeler got jacked up a little bit, and luckily was able to it was drivable. Got out of there, so that kind of ended that weekend. And so went back as soon as we saw this, and I was okay. I was like, well, I had this, and then the lower cam on my bow had bent as well, and I'm just like, well, this sucks. And it was the Saturday after my grandpa's funeral. So just like the next weekend, right, we're planning to stay a few more days. So once again, the hunt kind of got interrupted by a crazy thing, and I kind of talked to my uncle, like, maybe we could still go for you. And he's like, no, dude, let's bag it. His son had a football game he was gonna miss. He's like, well, if we pack up now, I could still get there and do that. I'm like, all right, let's do that. So we packed up and left, and just for this episode, we'll have another episode and talk about it, but just the grace and a miracle that I wasn't seriously hurt or worse from that. And it went from like the low of lows of not having, the lows of hunting, not seeing anything, being in all these areas, like where the heck do we go? We've tried a couple different areas, and we were going to ones that we hadn't really put cameras up or anything, just trying to find elk, and not hearing a lot of bugles, to after this accident. I just after I was okay and stood up there with my uncle and left, and on the drive home, I know I sent you a long polo, Brody, of kind of my experience, but it's got the point that hunting's what we love, it's what we do, but it doesn't, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, and it's what helps us get out there and refresh us and reset us. So fast forward, after I told Brody all this, I was like, man, I still got one more weekend. I was sore. I went to the doctor the next day just to get checked out because I landed face down and my binos and everything before they're rolling over me. Just wanted to make sure I got checked out, everything was good, and I was, luckily. And
yeah, for those that have made it this far in this podcast, you guys gotta listen to the next one, because this story that we're leaving you on a cliffhanger for is it's a pretty incredible miracle, and you guys are gonna want to hear it for sure.
yeah, very, nothing short of that, and very humbling. So I had one more weekend of the hunt to go. My uncle couldn't make it. He had some other stuff. He had gone up some other days and was telling me he heard some bugles, finally different basin, and had a trail camera, and we just weren't able to really get on them. And went back up another time, did a long walk. Weren't able to do it, so I had the last weekend, and my son he's been wanting to go, and a lot of it's like, dude, we're hiking way too far, like going for multiple days, like you have school, and he's 10, so anyways, I was just, kind of got the idea and prompting, like, just take your son this last weekend, because I didn't know I was still sore, so I didn't know how carrying a backpack was going to go, and if it was going to tweak something, hurt even more. So I still have trail cameras up in there.
Yeah, I think you had like 6?
Yeah, I had let's see, 1, 2,
maybe 6 miles.
It was 6 miles. I had 3 cameras left in there, and it was back 6 miles in to where we went originally. And I'm like, okay, there's water back in there. It's a little more remote. The elk are in there, and so it's a huge canyon. So I'm like, well, talk to the wife. I'm like, what do you think if I take Ledge and go up there? She's like, absolutely. So that's what we do. We plan. I take Ledge up there, but at the same time, my bow's still broke. So I called Brody, and we're similar body size, similar draw length, all that stuff, and he was graciously willing to let me take his bow so I could have something. So I'm like, she bought this new bow. I bought this bow next year, the Matthews Lift, and I busted it up my first year. I was pretty upset about it. So I'm like, I'm gonna go with Brody's bow and smoke a big bowl. I'm gonna be super happy, but then my bow is like, I didn't do it with my bow. With that, took Ledger up and just thought, we'll get up, we'll just hike slow, take our time. With me, being injured, I made my backpack as light as I could for what we needed, and we just went slow, so with hiking with him too, but he was a trooper, man. We ended up going, I think around all day. We were back in there all day. I think we went like 8.5 miles that day. And we just went up slow, glass at the top. And I kind of had cameras at the top of the canyon, middle, and the bottom. So we kind of popped up in the middle, walked the ridge up to the top, went in, checked the camera, pulled it, and then we sat there for, hour or so, because these are all kind of water spots. This was the wallow that I actually filtered water out of, and sat there for a while. There was stuff coming in like intermittent, but it was throughout the day, so I'm like, I don't have any other plans, and still didn't hear any bugles, so we sat there for a while, and then we bushwhacked through some trees down to the next water hole, checked that one, same thing, intermittent, and then we walked down to the bottom one and sat there for a while, because that's the one where we'd seen that rag 5 with the cows coming in. So, and he was there. I had pictures of him laying in this wallow, just sitting, like just a couple days before. So I'm like, this is probably our best chance. So we sat there, and they'd come around from this big steep pine draw and roll over and eat and drink and then go back. So we sat there, and then we kind of walked up the ridge just slow, seeing if we could look over and see if they were rolling around. Nothing, but a lot of fun with Ledger, just teaching him about wind, teaching him why we sit where we do on a water hole because of avenues of approach, where they come, what way the wind's blowing. So he had fun with the little powder wind indicator stuff, whatever you want to call it. So I'd kind of let him check, and every once in a while I'd look back like, hey, how's the wind? And he's like, we're good. I'm like, why are we good? Because it's at our face. I'm like, okay, let's keep going.
That's
so
awesome.
A lot of stuff like that, and just a fun time with him. We found some grouse, and he had a lot of fun. He got a big stick, and I got a video of him just trying to. It was in this sagebrush knoll, and we see it, and I saw it. I'm like, dude, grab that stick or stuff. Like, go get it. And he's just like walking around, sneak in, and I can. I was a little higher, so I kind of see it every once in a while, just like, and I'm like, hey, it's over there, it's over there. And he goes, and then he finally gets close, and I'm like, just go barreling out there, and it'll fly up, and just try and hit it with your stick. So he goes barreling, and then I'm like, it's like right in this spot by this rock, and then he just stops. You can hear him, you see him like looking around, and then it flies up, and he tries to hit it with his stick, and that was his highlight. But went back, had the wall tent with the stove, so we had fun having fires in there and hanging out and making forts and all of that. And coming back, the following day we went and glassed a different spot, and then we had to go home that afternoon. So packed everything up, went home, and he wanted to jump in a reservoir on our way out. I'm like, okay, whatever. So went in, and he jumped in this freezing reservoir. Had fun, and we went home. He was just kind of somber on our way home. I was just like, why is he all somber? Like, we just had a fun time. He didn't want to leave, and I was just like, hey, Led, you alright? He's like, yeah, Dad, I'm just tired. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. So he's like falling asleep in the truck, and so we get home and do our thing, and not that night, but the following night. I was putting him to bed and doing our nightly routine. He said, Dad, can I tell you something? And I'm like, yeah, bud. He's like, well, I'm kind of embarrassed. I don't want you to laugh at me. I was like, well, are you gonna tell me, is this a joke? Like, or I'm not gonna laugh at you. And he's like, I just wanna, when you asked me if I was okay, I wasn't, like, in the truck the other day. And I was like, I don't understand. Like, we had fun, you had a great time, some bonding time together. And he was like, well, that's why, Dad, I was just trying not to cry because I didn't want it to end. And I'm just like sitting, like a lot of emotions going through me, right? Like, why did he think I would laugh at that?
Right.
To what a great moment of knowing how important that was. And yeah, I probably could have hunted harder maybe if I was by myself, but just that experience with him and having that, and paying attention to kind of that prompting of taking him, really paid off, and a lot of fun. Just that moment he's probably gonna have forever as a dad, right? Or as with his dad, and we all have those. So just another moment of gratitude for just getting out away from electronics with my son and having fun in the mountains, teaching him what I love. And we didn't even have to see an animal to do that. I stopped with him in the next episode, the really cliffhanger. I stopped with him in that area, exactly where that happened, and kind of explained how important that area is to me now, and what happened. And so it was a really cool experience with that. But one of the things that I want everybody to know is, like, in life you go through hard things and you have hard times, but your family and your true friends are the ones that are always there and help you and build you up. And so with Brody's willingness to let me borrow his bow and some other, I think you let me borrow your muzzleloader one year before I had one.
Right.
I missed a buck with it. I'm blaming it on your muzzleloader, Brody. So that muzzle, you should just buy a new one because you missed a buck. I missed a buck with it. But I got Brody a little something just to tell him thanks. It's one of my other things. I don't know if you have a pair of these, but they're fingerless merino gloves.
That's awesome.
I don't know if you have a pair. If you don't, this was one that I loved for archery.
Thank you.
Just because you have the dexterity to still feel your release, or rifle with your trigger. And so I told your wife when I brought your bow back that I was going to get you some, so she couldn't leak it. So thanks to her for not saying anything. But I just want to say thanks, like having true friends that are willing to be there for you when you need it, even if it's letting you borrow a bow to go hunting, and it led into me being able to have that experience with my son. So just appreciate it. We've been friends for a long time, and I'm just grateful for our friendship. So
yeah, it wasn't even a thought to let you take my bow, so thanks for the gift in return. And that's one thing I want to say too, as we kind of wrap up this podcast, is to your point of, at the end of the day, friends, family, like that's what matters in life, your relationship with God and with Jesus Christ. And you luckily had that experience with Ledger where you got to take your son and be with your family. But there's a lot of hunts that we go on that we have to try to reconcile this balance of I'm leaving my family for 3, 4, 5, 6 days. My wife and kids are at home while I'm out doing what I love, having fun. And at least for me,
the balancing act.
It's like you have this huge wrestle in your head, and I try not to lead on to that much to my wife and kids. Like, I want them to see that, like, hey, I'm pursuing my passion, I'm having fun. But I'd be curious to ask this question to Amber. We need to get our wives on one day. But
yeah,
for me personally, I feel like every hunt that I go on, I come back a better dad and a better husband, just because of, I think, the perspective that being in the mountains gives you. Away from electronics, away from all the text messages, phone calls, social media, email, work, like the stresses of life. When you're sitting there on a mountain, whether you're by yourself or hunting with other people, and you have all these hours in a day to just be inside your own head, like, of course you're strategizing and you're hunting and whatever, but you have a lot of time to just think. And I think every hunt I come away from realizing what's most important. And so, as much fun as it is, as much of a passion as it is, like, at the end of the day, just what you said, I come away from every hunt more grateful for my family. And I'm grateful that my wife and my kids allow me to go pursue those passions that I love. And I hope that they all have passions that they pursue in their lives, and realize that it's okay to try to strike that balance. So anyway, it's a tough balance as a dad and as a husband, but at the same time, you also gain a great perspective for just God and his creations and the incredibleness and majesty of everything that he created. So anyway, just wanted to end on that note.
I do a lot of just like open thought praying, like conversation type things with God out in the mountains, and it just kind of helps, like you hit the nail on the head, like just bring back that balance to your life. I think everybody needs to find that out, whether it's hunting, golfing, dancing, whatever your hobby should be. Like, you need to make it a priority to do that. And if you don't have one, go try a bunch of different stuff. Find something you like and go with it. And
be a creator. You have the power to create your own life. And Amber and I have been talking about this a little bit lately, that we are sons and daughters of a creator. So go be a creator. Go like you said, try something new till you find your passion.
And everybody's different, and I don't think you have to be like, oh, well, I have to hunt, or I have to golf, or whatever. No, go find something that you love, and that just gets you away from the day-to-day tasks that you have to do with work and being a parent and having those times and moments, because we think back on all the hunting trips and just not even hunting, just out in the outdoors of camping or doing whatever with each other, with different family members, grandpas, uncles. They're just things that you really will cherish forever, and the amount of growth that you get, because you get into deep conversations up on the mountain with your family or friends or whoever you're with, and you just, a lot of growth that happens just from being out and going. So, and I think that's one of the things that I take away from hunting is just, and how you apply it to your life is, it's a grind, and you can't give up, and you have to stay positive, and sometimes you have to, in the military we call it Semper Gumby, like you're always flexible like Gumby, and needing to change at the drop of a hat your plan or your tactics or whatever it is. And I think learning that through hunting, through the different things that you had to do with stalking, and your patience and your studying of what's going on is no different than maybe parenting. Each kid's different, and you have to take a different approach. And I maybe learned that one doesn't work with this kid, and I gotta change to do it a different way. And same thing with work and different people you work with. Everybody's different, and find out what makes them click, and helping understand how you can connect with them, I think is a huge thing. And so,
yeah. Well, that's a wrap on our 2024 hunting stories, I guess. So thanks everybody for listening, if you made it this far on this episode of Peak Potential Pursuit, and stay tuned for the next one, because you're not going to want to miss it.
yeah.
Thanks for tuning in to the Peak Potential Pursuit podcast, where we have been inspired by another G4 journey. Join us next time as we continue to explore stories that unlock our peak potential. If you or someone you know would like to share your G4 journey, we would love to learn and grow from these experiences. Please contact us through Instagram at peak_potential_pursuit, or email us at the3pg4@gmail.com.